You get to a point where everybody wants to be a warrior, but if you don't have a cause, that's the problem. And I think that sometimes people, when you don't advocate for the right reasons, you basically become un.
How do you think it translated from MMA to what you do right now?
That transition came over quite a few years, but it also took a humbling perspective of me learning about how the human condition is. Everyone will tell you, hey, I'm okay, I got this, or I'm all right, until you're sitting in their living room and you see their exact situation in that point in time. And then you also understand that they're not okay.
The whole goal from my perspective is we need to get the body to be able to adapt to the environment.
And we'll talk about it too with the mentorship is I'm looking for the next fire chief, not just the next.
Today I have a very cool guest. He's an MMA fighter that went into being a firefighter, fire chief, and just helping people all along the way. And he explains how that fighter mentality has driven him from that all the way to being at the top of his level when it comes to helping the community and the first responders. You're going to hear about what we're trying to do to help the first responders in that whole industry, because they're a huge part of what keeps us safe, but yet they don't always get the best care. So we're going to go into that, and you're going to hear some amazing things about what we're doing with what he's doing with Alzheimer's, dementia, and the plan on how we're going to start helping more people, and his perspective from that 30 plus years of being in the industry and what we can do about it. So if you like what you hear from the podcast, like and subscribe to us, please. Chris Hickman, in the beginning, when I'm doing these podcasts, I'm thinking about like, while you're talking, he's
Exactly,
basically,
no.
I'm waiting for the next point to say my next question.
And you've always been one that you always share information. So you want to make sure you get
Yeah.
all the information out there. And I do believe that sometimes too, we're in a world where we're around so many takers. When you get around other people, especially during these interviews, and that I've noticed everyone you have on here are, they're just genuine good people. That's energy that's helpful for you for sure, as well as Dana. And just because the fact that you're used to so many people taking day in, day out, and that just sucks.
Yeah.
Just sucks. And why I'm like, now I went out right now with one of our folks who they're not profit. They're trying to raise money for stuff, but they're going about it in such a way that it's changed now from what you said you were going to do to now you're basically strong arming people for their donations. I don't feel like that's appropriate, and I do believe that anytime we get into the first responder world, we gotta that's a turn off immediately for all of us because we're so
Yeah, I know. I mean,
we're tied to so many political agendas already.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. So where I just started focusing more on like what I want to do with this, just us talk
Mhm.
and just kind of knowing some of your background story is cool, because then we can relate it to what you're doing now. And ultimately it all comes back to health and wellness, and how can we tie it in with what you do? Like, what do you do for health and wellness, and how do you think, what are you trying to do in that category of first responders and the mentorships that you do? And
And it's kind of crazy. I'm gonna tie it a lot into building harvests. I know it sounds crazy, but farming and developing individuals are very much one and the same.
oh yeah.
And that in itself is hard for some folks to believe because they look at first responders as resources instead of I'm like, well, actually, what I'm looking for whenever we're doing, and we'll talk about it too with the mentorship, is I'm looking for the next fire chief, not just the next hose dragger, not just the guy who just wants to get it. And there are some folks that they all start in one place, that they end up somewhere completely different. It's just like where your business now is, where you are now is not what you thought, when you started.
Right.
So I think that if we're not evolving,
Yeah.
that's what makes us who we are.
I mean, if you're looking for fire chiefs all the time, you're gonna get hose draggers, right? So you might as well look for those.
Yeah, and I do believe that there are folks too that if we start to understand that everybody has a unique gift that's unique to them, we just sometimes have to figure out that that gift has to be harnessed
Mm-hmm.
to get the maximum, because I think everybody has something different about them that makes them who they are. But I do believe that we're stifled by a workforce that is stay within these confines, do it in these hours, and this better be the product we get.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, tell me who you are, Chris.
So from who I started out as a young man, I was always that person looking for acceptance and trying to, more so not even acceptance, just trying to figure out who I was. I grew up, I bounced around a lot as a kid, grew up as a military brat, but my ability to adapt, I think, is what has helped me so much as an adult, because every 3 or 4 years you move to a different location, you figure out in family, but you also figure out a new set of friends, new set of values. And then within that, though, what's the most important in that period of time? Like, what is it? If family ties are really important, how do you look and watch? Because as a young person, especially one of my biggest influences growing up was in Hawaii, where the family value is completely different than it is here. I didn't even know what a nursing home was until I came back to Florida.
Okay.
So understanding the value of having multi generations under one roof, that took on a whole new meaning. But with that comes, now as we know science is evolving, what if we could keep everybody in the family a lot healthier during that process? And that's kind of driven me as a young person. Much like many of the folks that have probably been on your show, we all have evolved. I was a very argumentative young person, and I needed to find my way. And I ended up finding my way into martial arts and combat sports. And I found out real quick about humility and the fact that structure opens up doors. A lot of folks think discipline means you can't do stuff, but reality is it taught me a whole nother level of self-confidence, but also self-discipline that was really tapped into at an early age. Had quite an exceptional group of mentors during that time that actually held me accountable, that did not let me skip out on workouts. Because my family was financially strapped, I was one of the first kids there to clean and stay after the classes to make sure things were in order, just so to earn my due, so to speak.
Yeah. Like a movie I've seen.
Oh, yeah, I know, buddy, but I'm gonna tell you that I had a martial arts instructor, Charles Gray, and he was probably the most formidable person in my life as a teenager, because the fact that he just basically, there was no gray area. This is what I expect of you. This is, and it just made me shape who I was going to become.
That's cool.
Because a lot of the teenagers in the world, I think, just don't have purpose. And he made sure that you knew that you were valued and that you had purpose. And I think that carries into my adult life now and all the work I do in the youth.
Of course, yeah. That is powerful.
Yeah.
Having those mentors is huge.
I think it's just like bosses, though. Like, how many of us have all had a boss that we might not have learned a lot of great things, but we learned a lot of what not to do? I do believe that mentors, there are mentors that teach us good and bad, but they also both have value. I think everybody wants to see what's in it for me kind of mindset. And I think once we start to understand that everyone we work with in life is put in our life for a reason, something to be learned, something to be gained, but also some kind of insight that you can walk away with and go, okay, either I want to repeat that behavior or I want to stay as far away from it as I can.
Yeah, okay. So how did the MMA?
Well, in the early 90s, I literally had my best friend, Tom Sauer.
Yeah, Tom, you introduced me to Tom.
Yeah. And Tommy and I heard about this crazy sport. Well, they let you could do anything, kicking, punching, wrestling, picking people up and slamming them, throwing them on their heads. And of course, as a bunch of young guys, we thought that that was going to be, our big ticket. So, which it was. We were able, as two young meatheads, able to travel the world. We got a chance to meet some of the biggest personalities in the sport of MMA. What is, before it was now everybody considers MMA, but it used to be called No Holds Bar.
Okay.
And we were part of a group. There was about 5 of us here in Ocala that started training together, all former wrestlers, kickboxers. And then guys like Tom Sauer and myself, we traveled the country looking for bits, pieces of information, where to fight. And what we did is, believe it or not, warriors are kind of funny, because when you start talking about fighting and working together and training that hard, what you do is you develop bonds that are forever strong. And I think that those 5 folks that started training with us back in the day, if I picked up the phone right now and called them, they would, it's been probably a year or 2 since I've talked to some of those folks, but because we spent so much time together training and there for one another, even when it wasn't always convenient, because when you're training for a fight, you don't get to pick and choose. If your day is to train, that's the day to train. And with the guys that were training with us during that period of time, there was a big gap in learning. So we had to cram a lot of techniques and training into the time we spent.
So then to firefighting?
From firefighting, it was crazy because that same guy that got me introduced in MMA, I blamed him for firefighting because Tommy, he's like, at that time I'd been a paramedic for 7 years, and he was like, "Man, you are burnt out." And I said, "No, I was bored." Working for the ambulance service, then we would get all the excitement of the calls, but we just worked a nonstop schedule. So that schedule, it allowed me to eventually take a step back. I accepted the offer to go to fire college and went to fire college and actually celebrate my 25th year this month. So at Ocala Fire. And
Congrats, man.
yes,
That's
that's and but with that though, it changed my life. That right there, because coming to work every 24-hour shift that I got to do, it wasn't like work.
okay.
I got to enjoy. I mean, I think I looked at, and I always make this joke to a lot of the folks that I work with in the field, that if you pull up to any red light, you look to your left, you look to your right, you're going to see people who are totally miserable. That's probably because they're going to a job that they don't want to go to.
Yeah, for sure.
I never had that look on my face.
Yeah, me, me neither.
So I think too, with that comes the responsibility. I've had a great career. I've had many blessed opportunities, but I evolved from kicking indoors, fighting fires, paramedic, driving the trucks, captain now. Now I oversee what's called mobile integrated health, which is a combination of community paramedics with social work and other various healthcare professionals in the field.
So walk me through that. Like, what does that look like on a daily basis?
Basically, what I work with in the community are the folks that have no one to advocate for them understanding their health conditions, for them understanding the necessary resources that are in our community to get them to and from appointments, how to get a doctor, how to make sure they understand their medications, when to take them, how to take them. But then also, we work with a lot of our other community partners to understand housing situations because we have a very large senior population that gets into these situations where they become unhoused. So then you're working with folks on how to get them into a assisted living facility. Their needs change. So we work a lot with the doctors in the community to be basically their eyes and ears in the home.
Okay.
100 years ago, you'd have a doctor go to your house and treat you in the home. Nowadays, with technology being what it is, you have telehealth, which is the next big thing. But what we're looking at is facilitating the bridge between telehealth and that visit that used to be made in the field. So what we're going to be doing, we're working on this as an active project right now, is working with folks that will go out and facilitate those televisits, but actually give the doctors all the information they need, such as all the vital signs, the overall view, but also what's the housing conditions like,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
basically give our providers the best full picture of a situation that we could actually get.
Yeah. So you're trying to help people get into the best position possible.
Yeah, and right now, believe it or not, like Marion County, our program, we're one of the gold standards for the country right now. We are blessed because the fact that same thinking I took into fighting and working with all these great fighters. Basically, I'm fighting now for those who can't fight for themselves. We're advocates. I think that's a big part of what makes folks like you and I who we are, is that you get to a point where everybody wants to be a warrior, but if you don't have a cause, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people, when you don't advocate for the right reasons, you basically become unheard.
Okay.
And
How do you think it translated from MMA to what you do right now?
I think that transition came over quite a few years, but it also took a humbling perspective of me learning about how the human condition is. Everyone will tell you, "Hey, I'm okay, I got this," or "I'm all right," until you're sitting in their living room and you see their exact situation at that point in time. And then you also understand that they're not okay. They need more, and we can do better as a community.
Yeah. I mean, we adapt to our environment. So
Mhm.
a lot of people don't know how they feel until they start feeling better. And then they realize, like, wow, that's the situation I was in.
Well, and especially with you guys with all the work you do in detox and helping folks detox. I think that's something that we don't know how to do well. I think the human condition is to pull in. We very slowly do we let go of stuff.
Yeah.
And whether it's at a cellular level or it's at even just a emotional level, I think we let go very slowly.
Yeah. I think you're spot on about that. Is we're always thinking about what can we put in our body to help, right?
Mm-hmm.
supplements, antioxidants, you're sick, let's put something in. But we don't really think about detoxing and should we just focus on sweating if we're getting sick or heating the body up and sweating?
And all of that now, especially with firefighting, it's so crazy. The more fires that I've worked together with crews over the years, when we're busy and you're high heat and stress elevations are high, you would think that that would make for harder communication. And actually, in the fire service, makes for the best crew dynamics.
Mm.
The more that they sweat together, work together, they have a better outcome. Whether it's basically their just their general wellness, but also too when they are not fighting fires and they're not doing anything that's bringing them together as a team, what you have is a lot of now we have basically these open channels, if you will, that they're looking for something, and sometimes they fill those channels with things that aren't necessarily so
Like what's
bickering, junk
okay.
food,
Yeah, yeah.
starting the negativity. And in the fire service, we do well off systems.
Okay.
Everybody in the world, if I will say, even folks in any kind of rehabilitative structure, probably has probably a 25 to probably even a 50% better outcome than those who have no plan at all. So
I
we
mean, that
apply
makes
that in
sense.
any,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think structure, we do well with structure because it gives us purpose and we know what to do. And you don't have to necessarily be able to survive if you just know that I have to do these things. Not everybody has that survival instinct, that they know how to utilize. So it's good to have some, that's where everybody has their place, like you mentioned, where they do really well at this or that. And there's the driver of the truck, there's the one who goes out and can figure out a situation and get everybody to do what they need to do, right?
But I think communication too is based off of trust. And I think one thing that with the firehouse, because everybody likes to think that we get to walk into a burning building and everything's well lit, everything is completely obvious of what's on fire. Reality is, if you've ever been in something that's truly on fire, you really have no visibility in front of you.
Okay.
So a lot of what you do is from the outside in. So from the doing what we call a 360, and we can see what's going on. But then from the internal events, everything has to be clear communication. And I think sometimes it's easier, like I said, in terms of high stress, our group, especially first responders, they operate so well at high stress for long periods of time. It's just that period of quiet that comes after those events that I think sometimes is where the struggle starts.
So let's harness on that. So you as a firefighter, how did you stay on top of nutrition when you have to be on call all the time and sleep? And how did you handle all
Well, I mean, priorities, I think, are something that all of us say we have until you actually see where it falters. And I think as you start to age and get older and old injuries come about, nutrition takes on a whole new meaning because as a young person who has very limited injuries, you're not going to value rest, recovery, and nutrition. As you get older and you notice there's less of the folks your age in the fire service, you realize the longevity comes from the nutrition, the rest, and just supplementation. I think that
Do you think that's implemented in like all the firehouses?
I think it's absorbed through knowledge of the older guys. Just kind, I mean, because it really is. Well, no, because you have to pay attention to your surroundings, and as you move up through the ranks too, you notice less of the folks you started with.
But there's not like a system that teaches you like, hey, you're going to be on call 24/7. This is what you need to think about food wise, sleep wise, recovery.
And that's what we're trying to change that now.
Yeah. Okay.
Think about this: med students go to med school.
Right.
How much nutritional education do they get? Like an hour. An hour. How much sleep do they average med student?
Oh, yeah. None.
And then nutrition. So it's like all this
You're
stuff
right. Yeah, yeah.
you're talking to. We're talking about fire service. Great. I'm talking about medical providers who go out and control how your outcomes are going to be for the majority of your adult life, and they are sleep deprived. They're cramming in the caffeine just because the workload is so much. And also with that though, they're always looked at for answers or never given encouragement. And that's one thing about like the community health model, like we're working with now with our mobile integrated health team. We are looking also to give answers back to the providers so they know how the story is working out.
Yeah. Okay.
And getting real time updates is a big part of what we do so that it actually supports the first responders in such a way so they feel their efforts are valued.
Yeah. And that's something that we've worked together a long time now, trying to get this implemented in the first responder world. But I'd love to have exactly where first responders right after a fire, or you just had a shooting, or you
Mhm.
just went through, a person that was in a terrible situation, to be able to come over to a place where they can just come in, we scan them, we say, okay, this is way off,
Mhm.
or hey, you were just in a fire. And there's a system in place where you're gonna go in, you're gonna get exercise with oxygen, you're gonna sweat, drink this mineral
Yep.
solution, and get an infusion for you dehydration, and then go back to your job, you know?
That would make sense, and I do believe that's where and I think too that's like this organization with Auburn's GY6. We are working to support first responders, but more so, we're starting them off as soon as they become cadets. So when the folks come in, my goal is to capture their attention and to teach them from early on to take care of yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
You are the greatest asset. The individuals that come into, whether they're serving in police, fire, law enforcement, dispatchers, whatever we do, we have to change the model of you have to do this to be part of our organization or society. But everyone that retires from the fire department will be replaced in a timely fashion.
Okay.
Everybody that gets out of law enforcement will have someone who replaces them in a
Right,
timely
right.
fashion. But if that person worked 35 years, retire, and then they drop dead, what have we provided to that community?
It happens in all those kind of industries. Professional athletes is a perfect example. And it's not because necessarily, oh, it is the damage input on the body. Oh, yeah. But it's also not having a purpose anymore. Then the body and the brain just starts going down.
Well, just like you and I were talking earlier, I relate people, especially the development people, of lot to that of a harvest. You have to lay the foundation. You have to have the right soil. You have the right elements, but you also have to nurture that along. Sometimes you got to go in and prune out some of the things that we don't need. Let's face it, every so often, every New Year's, what happens? All of these resolutions come about,
Yeah.
and people prune all these things out of their diet, out of their life. They add exercise, they do
Yeah.
the fire service is great about you can tell when our physicals are coming up because the treadmills get replaced every year. Okay. So I say that, and then you also notice within the firehouses the diets cleaned up. The things, they don't cook all the starchy meals. So it is interesting to see how with developing folks, much like any field or garden area, you actually have to invest into it. But I do believe that sometimes we shut out the light, so to speak, because I think people get in their silos, and I think they get in their own heads that they are going to do it by themselves. First responders, the one thing that I think that we can do is we do a team approach a little bit better than most folks, but we have to get into this that it should be you never send one person into a fire.
Right.
You always send two or three or four,
Yeah.
but you send a group into the fire. And with that, though, that whole group's exposed. So, my goal, especially as a leader, is that for everyone that's come through, whether it be our mentorship program or probationary firefighters, and now even with my older folks that I'm working with in community health model, is improve their quality of life, but also empower them to continue afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you guys
I
do
mean,
especially.
why don't we have a system if they do so well with systems that it's just a wellness system?
It should be part of every
You should have
academy
to go
across.
through a
Yes.
little not seminar, but you should have a thing that you have to complete where you've read through and you understand that you have to
I think it should
on
be
this.
part of every certification we do. Just like if you're going to get your police standards, you should also have a nutrition and sleep cycle section that you have to test off on, because here's the end game is what does retirement life look like for all these folks? And again, you talked about professional athletes. And again, if we're not developing, if think about this, a harvest from nothing in the ground to a truly bountiful harvest,
Yeah.
it's about 7 years. And much of our lives are just like that. You think about every 7 years, you evolve in some way, shape, or form,
Sure. Yeah.
and you are not the same person. It's funny, grandson talking, and he's going to turn 8 this year. It's like, oh man, things are going to start to change. Your taste buds are going to get a little different.
Mhm.
You're going to start looking at people a little bit different, but you're also the way we form our thought process is so funny because it's based on all experiences that we had in those previous years.
Right.
So for what you guys offer folks is a chance to have a reset. It's easier to have a reset on your own than it is to go to the hospital. You go to the hospital, they give you
Yeah.
new medications, new doctors, all these new things that were never in your profile before. But also, you have all these new perspectives to consider. And I think sometimes it'd be a lot easier if you just had that system to follow from the beginning.
For sure. And no, I agree with that. These huge corporations like Google and that, these people are working on a computer all day and they literally have access to their lunches are all paid for. You can go get massages. You can go sit in these closed rooms where you're sleeping. You've got all these therapies. I wouldn't be surprised if they have hyperbarics. You can just jump in for an hour. And yet the firefighters, first responders, the people that are saving our lives and protecting us have little to none of that.
Well, it's funny because like we're one, like our community is one of three in a state that was recognized for a cancer bill that we're going to be getting some funding through Ocala Fire and that. But everything that we do as fire service is kind of it's here and there. It's never broadcasted. It's never like we've talked about this before, like getting grants and that. Sometimes it's like really great. If and here's the other part I hate: a lot of grants that come out there are about sitting in classes that have no takeaways.
Okay.
What you guys are offering are a plan, a purpose, and a process.
You're physically getting
Yes. And to me, I think that's the refinement process. I think that what we do as folks, especially as people who serve in the community, we are looking to better outcomes, but sometimes it's our own outcome that gets put on the back burner. And I've been guilty of that. When I came in just even a few years ago and we did all that we did during the COVID era, that had it not been for the therapies that you guys offered, I'll be honest, I had several other folks that have one's been retired out because of that situation. The other one's had permanent damage.
Yeah.
But again, why is it that we have to pull teeth to get people to do even on their own? Like, and the process has to be built in. The systems have to be implemented.
I don't know what it's going to take to get to that point where we can get either the funding or the support to do that for first responders. But I do remember back when John Travolta did a scenario, right, with sauna and different things, and
our guys
sounded great.
Yeah.
But I don't know what happened.
The follow through. Yeah. And a lot of those programs fall short because interest. People just lose interest. But I will say this: if you took somebody at year one of their career and you say, listen, I'm doing this as part of the next 30 years of your
like this
that needs to
part
be,
of your job.
Yes, it needs to be. That needs to be the checkoff shouldn't be the physical. If the physical is basically just a highlight of the years of vets.
Yeah.
But instead, there should be proficiency and maintenance that each person is responsible for to report back. But also, with all the measuring devices we have nowadays, why are we not measuring better outcomes? And that to me is it's one of the things that we're even using now with community medicine is the fact that we're going to be start working on remote monitoring so I can monitor those vital signs at home to see what is it really like, not just because I'm there checking it, but what is going on the other times, because now we know that blood pressure doesn't have to be checked at the doctor's office.
Yeah.
I don't have to be with you to put the pulse oximeter on your finger. You can actually have one yourself.
Right.
And then the scale doesn't lie. So you gain 2 or 3 pounds for our heart failure folks. That makes a big difference in outcome, especially a couple consecutive days of that gaining. That's usually results in a hospital trip. So if we can prevent folks from having to go back to the hospital for things we can maintain better at home, because here's our healthcare system so overwhelmed with so many different folks that are truly sick. So, and I try to keep folks out of the hospital if they don't need to be there. And one of the partners with our community medicine program is Advent Health, and they have been amazing partners. But part of that though too is that if it's stuff that can be managed at home, why not manage at home so that we can improve those who do go to the hospital get a better level of service.
Yeah. So as an OG of 25 years in the firefighting industry and that, what are some things you could tell firefighters that are maybe just getting into it or not that far into it?
From the early on, take care of yourself. We need to make sure that, and we also need to find accountability folks that will help us to just track our progress, but also just enough to be humble enough that you can be approached by someone and say, hey, I'm noticing this is starting to fall off or this, because as time goes on, performance can teeter a little bit, but also too, competition helps to keep things going in the fire service. you can't do anything that isn't competition based. It could be anything, and they'll find a way to compete at it. But the biggest thing is compete with yourself. If your numbers are consistently going down, figure out a way that gets you, and it might be become part of a, a workout organization that actually helps to empower you. It could be something as simple though, getting with the right people at the right time of day. Because I used to believe that at the firehouse right now, we're seeing some things change where we have, it used to be at 3 o'clock every day everyone went out to work out. Okay. Now we're finding that we live in Florida. 3 o'clock. Yeah, 3 o'clock in the afternoon is probably, so you have guys now that are jumping in first thing and getting that workout done. Well, what does that do with a group of people? Say you have 5 to 10 folks who start their day working out, sweating, and straining together. This just goes right back to what we started the conversation with. If they are getting their heart rates up, their body temperatures up, and they are doing it as a team, I guarantee you the rest of that day looks so much different.
Plus, you're seeing what your other team members can do. So then you know what they're capable of.
And just assessment. Yeah, I think that there's assessment, but there's also the ability to encourage. I think that sometimes, and I do this a lot with the guys that are coming up through the ranks now that are looked at as leaders by the group, is like, what are you doing to make sure those around you are getting better as well? Because if you're only focused on just on yourself and you're not doing anything to encourage, and it can be just a positive word, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be assigned to them as their personal trainer, but it can be the way, the words you use, the time you approach them. And it's kind of like waiting until someone's yelling and screaming to try to interrupt and give them good, advice. That's probably not the time or place, but people do it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, do you take care of yourself?
There are times that I have, like here recently, I've taken basically a 3 month sabbatical from everything because I wanted to do a reset. Because you and I had spoke about them too, especially with the amount of stress that, I will say this, the higher in rank I've gone, my stress has changed, and it's to a point where, because I'm looking at long term, what can be sustained, and that's one of the biggest thing right now. So I took a break from working out, and what I'm doing now is getting back into slow load changing and just easing back. But also, what I'm trying to do is more monitoring on my sleep. So because when we talked about it before, cortisol affects everybody, and I think if that was part of the regular physicals, like people really truly had a baseline cortisol level where they come into the fire service at, and realize that you can do subtle changes. What I don't believe in is kind of like New Year's resolutions. You make 12 changes at one time and you don't know what works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point. The whole goal from my perspective is we need to get the body to be able to adapt to the environment, right? So if you're a firefighter or if you are a police in the police or anything else, military, you have a different, slightly different environment and you really have to adapt to that. So that's where everybody's so different. So you can't do 12 different things, but you do need to try to get the body to change and get out of what it's learned, and maybe it's not the best thing because as soon as you go into like a traumatic event that affects you emotionally and physically, and you need to tell the body, like, show it that it's okay, that traumatic event, because you're doing all these other good things for it that keeps it and knows that that was just a traumatic event. Kind of like you go and you eat some Twinkies.
Yep.
Your body should know that that's shit.
It's not real food. So
Yeah, it should know that. But if you eat Twinkies all the time and it's relying on that, it's gonna survive off Twinkies, and then your body will adapt to Twinkies, right?
Right. I think that one thing that we all do is we get stuck in what we know. I do believe, especially now with this part of my life, working with folks with dementia. I have a very large population. Marion County, believe it or not, has over 15,000 folks with documented Alzheimer's.
Is that a big number?
That's a very big numbers, So
You
for
think
us,
that's here.
because of the amount of retirees and folks that, but with that comes studying all the different parts of what they've done to get to their present situation. And the biggest thing are the folks who stop doing everything are the ones who, the ones seem to stumble them up.
That's the purpose. Yep. So how do we fix that?
And I think that's engagement. We need to be engaging with we need multi-generation projects, because the more generations that we tie in, the better the perspective. But also too, look at how much knowledge like our seniors have, that they don't have to have all the answers, but I'm sure they've seen things done a certain way.
For sure.
But with that, they need the input from the youth to keep engaged.
Yeah.
And for us, instead of shutting them out, because it seems like, oh, well, you put your 40 years in with this, you go ahead, we're going to put you out and you retire. Here's your watch, enjoy. And that's not, I don't believe that mindset. My wife always laughs because she goes, after retirement from the fire service, I'm either going to end up as a political figure or a door greeter at Walmart because I can't sit still long enough to do.
Without just being an OG that sits at a firehouse and is able to like help answer questions.
We do. Actually, one of my biggest mentors there in Remington has been retired for nearly 25 years. It's kind of crazy, but he was one of the original fire instructors that when my cadre class went through, and he is a perfect example of why the multi-generational impact is necessary.
Okay.
I have, like I said, TR, who's, I don't want to say how old he is. He's probably in his 70s, but he is more knowledgeable about knots and fire service technology. But he also is a multiple generation firefighter who has history that goes way back. So when we do things in our fire museum, he can tell us about those fires and those situations and that how we came to be as a fire service. And then I have like Auburn, who is, the GY6. She's 11 years old, or 12, sorry, but just started working on developing support systems to support these first responders. So I've got a feeling we're going to be doing some more stuff together and working through with Auburn stuff. But what she brings to the table is life through a child's eyes. And you can't tell her, no, you can't do this because that doesn't make sense, because all she's doing is supporting first responders and she's making things happen in such a way because it's legitimate. It's not based on a political belief. It's
Right.
probably, she's doing it from, again, with nothing but the truest of intent. And with that comes, when people can see transparency, I think trust is built a lot better.
What are the tools she's using to?
Honestly, when we started with her organization, she started 8 years ago as a 4-year-old, just wanting to support the first responders. They started off by just doing some Christmas events. They would host Christmas events. Well, it grew to the point where there's several hundred first responders showing up to her Christmas event each year. They outgrew their front porch.
What does that look like? She's giving gifts out?
Oh, she's giving gifts, just like I'm going to give you here. This is actually one of our challenge coins. That was a custom challenge coin that is that right there is her organization on the back. It's her handwriting, but Auburn is personally affecting change by being the change. She's not just telling people how great they are, she's showing them how great they are. So now with the challenge coins, we literally give a challenge coin to every first responder we keep in contact
Awesome.
and encourage and to encourage them in such a way that's not just about, oh, well, we think you guys do a great job. No, she's giving them a coin, a patch, a
You
sticker.
get a coin for a purpose. It's
Yeah.
not just because it's a participation
Yep,
award.
right. And the hard is that, the history of challenge coins comes back all the way to the war when pilots couldn't carry a flag on them to show who they were and who they were associated with it. So they would have a coin that they could show their
Somebody writing this for you.
yeah, for all the work you do with first responders. And people don't realize that people don't value you for the first responder work. They value you as baby because you just always just a good dude who just treats people fair. No, you really do. But with that though, you've indirectly helped a lot of our first responders, and people don't realize that that's a part that it's hard to do because we won't let people help us.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
I say that full transparency, but as I get older, my goal in my last part of my career is going to be to do everything I can to change that and make it so that we are more open to allowing folks to give us a hand when we need it. Because I do believe that detox is a lot easier when there's less toxins in your system.
Sure.
And that even goes that to an emotional level. I think that we get a physical each year that tells us how strong our heart is.
Yeah.
They don't do a physical each year that requires you to talk about all the bad experiences you had just experienced in the last 365 days.
Yeah, no shit.
So you build that type of toxins over the course of 30 years, and then you expect them to then all of a sudden Here's a stop date. And now you move forward throughout life and everything's butterflies, puppy dogs, and all these in betweens. And you still are dealing with the 30 years of baggage.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to know that one of the big reasons that we are, for the most part, okay, able to function every day is because we move.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the US is one of the biggest places for working out. That's just known for, CrossFit, all the crazy workouts and gyms and looking great. I think that's our saving grace because if you look at everything else in the US, from food to pharmaceuticals to all that, we should be in, I mean, probably statistically, we are not the greatest in health wise,
Right.
but working and moving is what's our saving grace. So as soon as you stop somebody from moving, all that 30 years of toxic buildup you're talking about now has nowhere to really go or be getting get rid of or detox.
Right.
That's the scariest part. So people need to know that you need to keep moving. If you're not going to go and do additional detoxing, like getting in a sauna and sweating, going outside and sweating, standing in the sun, going in the ocean and just floating there. These are all things that naturally go hunting. Whatever it is that you do that's outdoors, all of that is how we detoxed for millions of years naturally. And you have to harness that. And if anything, the biggest takeaway is just keep moving. Don't
Add to that. One of my biggest, probably present day mentors is Dr. Mary Lasada, who's the chief medical officer for Heart Florida. But she's also a psychiatrist and a neurologist.
Oh, nice.
And the biggest thing with her, she keeps us all on our team grounded by the fact that we're all people.
Mm-hmm.
We're all made of the same elements, but we have to stay moving and we have to stay with something that's coming in positive that makes the difference, because that positive that makes the difference, and that is a movement piece. That is.
For sure. So I just went to this conference in San Diego, learned a lot of really cool stuff, but I learned from this specialist in neuroscience, right? So he's been doing this like 25, 30 years, just focusing on the brain, how we think, how the brain works, how it affects us. So he's predicting and seeing that the biggest trend coming up is going to be neuro health. It's been other things like heart health and other types of categories, neuro health. And so, really cool fact you brought up was that we have roughly 3,200 thoughts a day. No matter what, whether you want to have them or not, you have 3,200 thoughts. If the majority of those thoughts, let's say 2,000 of those thoughts are negative, then do you think that'll impact your health?
No, it's got to.
For sure, right? And so that's the environment you're in, that's the people you're around, that's the situation you're in, if you're doing something you love or don't love. So we really have to figure that part out. And with this huge population of Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that you're dealing with, think about the environment they're in. A lot of them are probably in like a place where they just don't move.
Oh, social isolation and
Have no purpose.
and that's a big part, is finding folks that have been so successful in life, but because they're brilliant, they've been left alone,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody feels like smart people have problems.
Right.
So, but what we've learned through all of the field visits and the hands-on trips to the home to see what's going on, to build a story, what have you, is that at some point they became departed from society. And it's funny because you can have things shipped to your house, food, all these things, and never touch the outside world anymore.
Sure.
And while you're at it, you can have someone who cuts your grass and does everything. So the appearance is that everything is a lot like our bodies. There's a lot of folks that are super aesthetically nice to look at, but on the inside, they're a cesspool of all these different things.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is what resonated with, we have to create change. And even if it's just coming and knocking on the door, getting an interaction with those folks, we need more volunteers to go out and check in with folks. Because
That's great.
if somebody goes to the door and answers the door, and that's the first time they've had movement in that month, or open the door to the outside world,
Yeah.
you create a stimulus that will definitely create some kind of a better outcome.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that
Really does.
and I think with what we're doing in these conversations, this is necessary, but it needs to be had with like healthcare providers. Their eyes are changing now toward better. And alternative medicine is really not alternative. It's just another, and it's can enhance what they're already doing in their practice.
It's pretty much bringing back the original medicine again to a point where people are like accepting it. But technology, to me, technology is why I'm able to integrate the medicines together and just give somebody a direction, but they accept it because it's like, oh, it's a technology that's telling me that I should take milk thistle or drink water in the morning.
And I think that's what you and I are very much alike. We connect the dots.
Right.
And every time somebody tells me I can't do something, I take no and not right now. You're close. And if I can use one or the other to help the cause, by not standing down, and that goes back to being a fighter by heart.
Yeah. Right.
You are going to find a way to get a better outcome for folks. And sometimes it costs me, my chief and I have a great relationship, but he understands each day that there's an opportunity for 2 phone calls, one being what amazing work I do, the other being they can't stand me because of the work I do. But when you're creating change, it comes with friction.
Sure.
And with that, is acceptance isn't always easy.
Yeah.
But I do believe that for us, because I believe Marion County, Ocala, Florida is the best place in the world to live. But I feel like if we don't make it better and continue to grow with the way our community is growing right now, it leaves opportunities for us to fall into some of these big city problems.
Yeah. So what would you say is the biggest takeaway? Like another thing you want to tell anybody in the first responder world or in general, like a takeaway from this that you think is good for everyone?
I think that everybody that works as a first responder should be plugged into investing in someone else, not just themselves. Because I feel like we live in a world where everything is based on our phones, our apps, and everything's person driven. Instead, why don't we invest in some other folks along the way to bring them up with us?
Interesting. So give me an example of what a firefighter could do to invest.
Just skill set. If we have a new firefighter, one of our more seasoned folks are going to get with them and train them up on certain skills to make sure they're proficient on a basic firecraft.
Yeah. Okay.
With that, though, a lot of our young people don't know how to cook. A lot of our young people don't know how to clean.
Yeah.
A lot of our young people don't have social cues that are, when to interrupt or when to get involved in the conversation. And we always laugh. The new guy, especially within our fire service or with Ocala Fire, the first year, they're not even allowed to sit in a recliner because it's all about getting that first year knowledge in. And it usually comes from doing something or at the kitchen table, reading, studying up but after that, sometimes I feel like there are folks that they want them to be pulled into sitting in those recliners, but it's trap. I think as soon as you get comfortable in life, it is proven fact that your perspective changes. I have a medical director who does triathlons and that, and I'm like, why would you want to swim that far, run that far, ride a bicycle that far? And the biggest thing is it keeps pushing himself and he's changing and adapting. And just like we're talking about with every individual, I think every 7 years there's something different.
Yeah.
In a season in life.
I think one of our goals should be, and we can come back to this maybe and hopefully by the end of this year, is we have either a health coach or some kind of a system in place that goes into every firehouse or with multiple firehouses at the place and talks about what you do first thing in the morning before you go to bed. Just those two simple things, what everybody should do. And it's to be in that environment and to have a protocol for post fire, a protocol for major events like that they know what they need to do every time. It should be like a manual that they read through and they check that they.
I like it because here's what we all do well off list. And as much that a male will tell you, I hate to-do lists. Well, honestly, it helps you get it done. There's a beginning and an end and all the activity happens in between. So we all fight change. We all want it. That's the one thing about firefighters. They all want things to be better. We just all want to be part of that process. But I appreciate you having.
Yeah, I appreciate this. I'm gonna be all around.
Yeah, that right there. Yes. Oh no. She has custom coins. We try to do one each year.
Okay.
So she has collided, so we got to get one every year. Yeah, and she's an amazing young lady. I think we definitely need to do a bit with have her on here because here's the great thing about young people, they tell you how it is.
Yep.
They're not polished, but they're genuine. And I think for us, we need people like you and I, especially. You need folks to share with you from the heart and less of about what the object. We all think as we get older, what's our objective? What are we going to accomplish? What are we gonna, but through a child's eyes, it's this is my vision. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Chris.
I appreciate you for
Appreciate it.
Thank you, bud.